Welcome back. It's the Brady Farkas Show right here on WDEV, AM and FM, and WDEVradio.com, as he does every single Thursday, although I wish it was on happier of circumstances after watching the Celtics again last night. It's joining us now is Adam Kaufman, WBZ News Radio in Boston. Adam, how are you?
Crappy.
Yeah.
Things suck, man. I guess, just listening to Brad Stevens on the radio a little while ago, I guess I'm having a better week than him. He said he had a root canal and dealt with an identity theft issue. So, in the grand scheme of things, I guess I'm doing great.
Celtics are 15-17. Who's most responsible for this mess?
Well, Danny Ainge, because he built the roster. And then it's the players. And then obviously Brad Stevens, feeling bad for his mouth and wallet and identity and all of that is, obviously subject to blame as well. I mean, no one is free of blame in this situation, but I think it is on Danny Ainge first and foremost for building the roster. And then it's the players for lack of execution.
We said all Patriots season that the Pats seemed ill-prepared for the Tom Brady scenario. Like it almost snuck up on them somehow. Did the Gordon Hayward situation do the same thing to the Celtics? Because I feel like they should have wanted him to stay. And if they thought he was going to leave, there needed to have been a better plan in place. Did they mishandle the Gordon Hayward situation?
Well, they definitely wanted him to stay. And, if you believe what was reported at the time, Gordon Hayward at least considered it. Now, it wasn't his first choice. We all know that. So let's not be misguided here. But I do think he was at least open to the idea of returning to Boston for a variety of factors, probably Brad Stevens being, among the top reasons. But, as far as mishandling it, I guess it sort of comes down to what did you want them to do, right? I mean, consider that he was a free agent. They only had so much control at that point in time. People want to lament the fact that they didn't make the deal with the Pacers to bring in Miles Turner, who was having himself a very good year, and obviously Doug McDermott and give you a little bit of depth there on the bench and three-point shooting and a lot of the things that this team so sorely has missed and desperately needs. But you also, if Gordon Hayward was willing to take that deal, which we really don't know, because he would have to have had to opt in to his final year with the Celtics or sign and trade, obviously, where he signs a new deal with the Celtics and they send that deal off to the Pacers. But he is determining at that point in time the amount of money he's going to make. And if the Pacers aren't, as they seemingly weren't, willing to go to the level of the Hornets, then what are you supposed to do? If he chose money over all else, and we don't ultimately know if that's the way it worked out or if that was his mindset, either way, he got the most money from Charlotte. And so that's where he went. There was nothing the Celtics could do about that, short of, match that contract, which would have been insane. The Celtics would have been killed if they had given him, 110, 120, whatever it was, $1 million over 4 years after what we experienced the last 3 years. Not to mention the fact that as good as he has been this year, and certainly has played at an all-star level, there are, injuries. He's hurt right now. So, people would have been just bold. They would have been ballistic. So, I do think that by the masses, and I'm not saying this about the organization, I think by the masses, by the fans, and fans can be awful at times. We all know that. And I'll count myself among those. There was an element, which this I didn't do. There was an element of taking Gordon Hayward's services when healthy for granted and, dismissing what he did, what he brought to the team, and just viewing him as redundant and getting in the way of the development of Tatum and Brown. And I don't agree with that. Now, if Hayward were here, would Brown and Tatum both be putting up 25 plus points per game? Probably not. But also, would you need them to? I heard Mike Gorman say this the other day, who is not often critical of the Celtics in such a passionate way as he was. Would you rather, and I don't know how Tatum or Brown would feel about it, maybe to them, and I don't think this is the case, but maybe those are guys who care more about being all-stars than winning. But let's just say that's not the case. Let's say they are team first and team-oriented goals over individually oriented goals first. And I think they are wired that way. I do choose to believe that. Would they rather average 22, 23 points versus 25, 26, but win more games and you got more complementary offense coming from elsewhere? Maybe they would. Problem is, without a Gordon Hayward, without a healthy Kemba Walker, without a Marcus Smart. There is no complementary offense on this team in any sort of reliable way. And it's a part of what makes this club so difficult to watch.
Adam Kaufman, WBZ News Radio in Boston, with us here on the Brady Farkas Show on WDEV. The Kemba Walker thing is interesting. His play is his play, but I'm more pointing my finger at him in some kind of leadership role, I think. The fact that this team can't close out games, I feel like, is not a Brad Stevens problem. They can build 24-point leads with Brad Stevens. I don't think it's his ultimate decision-making that causes those demise. And I think Walker should be the veteran presence out there helping keep everything together in the fourth quarter. Am I grasping at straws here? Is there some truth to that?
Well, I think the biggest problem facing this team, and put it on whoever you want, put it on Stevens for not motivating the right way, put it on the players themselves, obviously, for the ones that appear to be going through the motions on the floor and not having enough pride, but the effort is just not there. And I'm far from the first person to say that. It's a lack of effort, heart, snarl, compete, call it whatever you want to call it. They are more often than not going through the motions. And, Tatum admitted the other day they took their feet off the gas when they were up 24 against the Pelicans. And obviously it fell apart and they lost in overtime. But, this getting embarrassed by the Hawks multiple times, losing to, teams like the Wizards or the Pistons, like these are bad teams. And maybe you start to look at the record and say, you are what your record shows you are, as who Parcells, I'm paraphrasing, but maybe the Celtics are a bad team. I don't believe that. I really don't. But, obviously they're lumped in with all these clubs that I do think are bad teams. And, they're losing to them. So I don't put it on Kemba, to your point specifically about, a lack of leadership and not holding it together. I do certainly think, and he has alluded to as much, Kemba Walker's confidence is just down. The guy is at times moping. He has said his words, I need to keep my head up. I need to, ignore the adversity and block that stuff out. And just, he's not playing with any confidence right now. And you feel for him when you watch. He's missing wide open shots that the guy regularly knocks down. And, my concerns, and I've said this to you before, aren't, I'm more concerned about his health limitations and the knee than I am about shooting percentages. He's actually played pretty well over the last handful of games, got off to an incredibly slow start. What to me is, and I was just talking about this on my podcast with Gary Washburn earlier today, is, I just think it's so jumbled. It's so out of whack. Kemba's in, he's out. When he is in, he's got the minutes restriction. When he's out, there's no de facto starting point guard with Marcus Smart injured. There's no, clear rotation, even when everything just becomes a mess. It's like they're two different teams, the one with Kemba, the one without Kemba, and you're not going to get Kemba half the time, maybe more than half the time. And he's certainly not playing back-to-backs, but is it the first leg? Is it the back leg? There's, all of this, it's just a mess. And how could it not be messing with players on the floor as well? I think and this is not Kemba's fault specifically, he's going through what he's going through, but just his sheer presence, is screwing things up. It's jumbling things around in ways that they're having a hard time dealing with.
I can't believe Danilo Gallinari, who was like 1 of 13 when they played last Friday in Boston, went 10 of 11 or 10 of 12 from 3 last night.
How about
I still can't get past that.
How about put a guy in front of him and don't let him shoot threes from 30 feet? Like I know the expression is like Trae Young's going to do whatever he's going to do with make Danilo Gallinari, guys like that beat you. Like that's what you say about teams like when you're playing the Bucks. Like don't let Giannis beat you. Let Middleton more so, or some of those secondary guys. Well, like Danilo Gallinari is not a secondary star. Okay, this isn't like, Trae Young was good, but man, you should have seen what John Collins and Clint Capella did. Like Danilo Gallinari at this stage of his career is nothing but a shooter. Dude can't move, can't go to the rim. All he does is hang out around the arc and put up threes. And the Celtics just let him. They just let him. It was an embarrassment.
He's a man after my own heart. He's like 36-year-old guy at the Y playing with dueling knee braces.
Look, he's everything I want to be. But but the fact of the matter is, a guy like that can't beat you in an NBA game, especially when what was so disheartening, man, is that I thought that, I really thought last night, win or lose, it was going to be a statement game, at least in terms of showing you have heart and stones, balls, compete, all that. Like, and they allowed 40 points in the first quarter and mailed it in. Like, the only guys who showed any effort were the reserves. The guys who came off the bench are the ones that even cut that deficit a little bit, but never to the point where you thought, yeah, they might win this game. The guys who are right there at the top, and I sort of see both sides of the coin, all the criticism being thrown at the feet of Tatum and Brown, but at the same time, what else do you expect from them? Because what else do they have around them? And there's only so much they can do. That you can still play with a little bit of pride. Even I'm not looking for more statistically from Tatum and Brown. Just give it a little more. Just a little more give a crap. And I mean, it makes a difference. They are, I got into arguments with people about this on social media last night. You can debate Marcus Smart's importance, and I clearly am someone who believes that he is, a key cog and more important than some other people do to not just this team, but a contending team in general. But when Brad Stevens postgame is talking about, we need guys to, dive for loose balls, go for every 50-50 ball, to chase down guys, to all the different things that he said postgame. He's basically describing Marcus Smart. He really is. We need guys out there that are just playing with that sort of fire, that sort of tenacity. And absent Smart, and Tristan Thompson gives you some of it, but your true leaders of this team, they're not doing it. They're just not doing it.
Adam Kaufman, WBZ News Radio. I will get you out of here on this. I think we can all agree that Cam Newton did a good job in the season of not making excuses. He did a good job of being accountable in the season. His comments this week on the Brandon Marshall-led podcast about how COVID-19 impacted his season, do you land there as those are valid reasons, or those are excuses that we don't want to hear?
I really didn't have any problem with his comments.
Me either.
I think he handled all of. I didn't listen to the entire podcast. I've probably listened to the first half hour or so, but a lot of the stuff that obviously you mentioned, I've already heard or heard on social media as well. I didn't. There's a difference between excuse making and just laying out the facts. And I think what he did was laid out the facts, and he had every opportunity to bust on Bill or McDaniels, play calling, guys around him, inferior weapons, any sort of number of that he could have done. Now, I think it was calculated and wise to not do that, because he also knows that if any team is even going to give him a chance to compete for a starting job in 2021, it's probably the Patriots. So why burn bridges? And, those guys that were with him, obviously Marshall and Ocho Cinco and Taylor, like, they were all prodding, trying to get him to do that, and he wouldn't. He held firm, and he was great, and kind of went the other way, praising those guys obviously. But in terms of what he talked about, I am not clearly a physical specimen or a professional athlete, or someone who is as trained in all the different ways that a guy like Cam Newton is, who is just a workoutaholic. I mean, the dude is a machine. You see some of those workout videos. He is. Jason Tatum, bringing it back to the Celtics, has talked about his breathing being out of whack since contracting the coronavirus. We don't know, those of us who have not had it, and those of us regular people for that matter, we don't know how it truly affects a person's body. Not to mention, it affects everybody differently. So even if you have had it and well, it may affected you differently for better or worse than it did Tatum or Cam Newton. So I'm certainly not going to sit here and dismiss him saying, even though I was asymptomatic, I was affected by the coronavirus, which really he didn't even put much on. He put more of it on the fact that he fell behind. It's full steam ahead. They're running a 20-year system here. I'm trying to, stay as up to date as possible with no training camp, no OTAs, no mini camp, coming in late, signing right before the season in the first place, not knowing any of these guys or these coaches. And I'm just trying to stay on the road. And, I get sidelined for 2 weeks and I come back and they're 4 exits ahead of me and I'm doing my best to speed up and I can't. And, to me, that's not excuse making. That is what happened. Now, that doesn't mean that, that doesn't suggest that, oh, that's the reason he couldn't throw the ball. Like there's a physical element that comes into play, obviously, where Cam Newton just straight up wasn't good last year. But I think you'd be foolish to think that, and I don't want him back, so don't confuse what I'm saying, but I think you'd be foolish to think that he wouldn't be better next year with all of those things that you normally have, that, you know, you project to have in the 2021 season that he didn't have in 2020.
Completely agree with you. I don't think it's excuse making at all. I think the truth is allowed to be spoken, and we applaud athletes for, you know, we say we want the truth and transparency from athletes. He finally gives it. Now people want to crush him for that too. The only thing I differ on is, you know what? As long as they draft somebody, I'd be okay bringing Cam back. That's the only thing I differ on. But overall, I think what you said was spot on. So Adam Kaufman, WBZ News Radio in Boston, with us every Thursday. Adam, man, we appreciate it. We will talk to you again next week.
Pleasure, man.